Welcome, everyone. So we are doing another workshop, CAE's Academic Success Workshop Series. My name is Dennis Milan, of the CAE, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues here, Irene Costco and Costa. Professor Costa will be our facilitator. She will be sharing some guidelines on note taking. So, Professor Costa.
Thank you. Today we're going to be talking about how to take good notes, accurate notes, notes that you will be able to use once you have left the classroom. So let's begin. Note taking is absolutely one of the most important things that you can do in your class as you spend your time in the classroom.
Let me share the screen so our viewers can see. Yourself will be. Go ahead, Bob.
One of the most important things that you can do while you are in class is to follow the lead of your instructor and to find out what is the most important things that are information that you will need to know. You're going to be able to have to then, give up or, I'm sorry. One of the most important things that you will need to know as far as responding to any sort of essay assignments you would have or any test or exam that you may be given. So that's the purpose of taking the notes. You want to make sure that you listen carefully to what is going on, in your surroundings and look for different highlights. And we're going to be talking about some of those highlights. We're going to look into 3 different ways of taking notes within the classroom. We'll go through each one of them. Each one has its positives and negatives. And then at the end, we'll do an activity that you will be able to assess your note-taking skills and maybe plan to either do your note-taking a little bit differently or to maybe adopt some of the ones that we give you today. One of the benefits of note-taking is that it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you alert while you were in class. And as you were writing, you are engaging not only in the classroom, you're engaging your listening skills, you're engaging your mind and also your visual skills as well. We always used to say in the old days that if you can write it, you'll remember it. And in taking the notes, you were writing it down one time to be able to remember it again at a future time. You have to be organized in putting your notes down on paper in some fashion, something that is intrinsic that you yourself can understand. Your notes are for you. They are really not for anybody else. So as long as you can understand them and you understand the organization of them, they will be of service to you. So you have to find whatever makes you most comfortable in recording your notes. It also will create a condensed version of your class. What happens in class, and if you take your notes in the order in which they're discussed, you will know not just what happened in class, but when it happened as well.
And Bobby, definitely, I can attest to this one, especially the first point that you raised about keeping person alert. So it does keep me alert. As a student, I notice the more senses I engage during a class, the easier it is for me to remember the whole class. And actually, this one, it didn't only serve me as a student, it helps me up to now. So when I am in meetings, I take notes as well.
Absolutely.
And as I take notes, I become more engaged. I participate more. And I tend to remember the contents of the meeting.
Oh, absolutely.
And Irene, if you have any insights, feel free to share them as well.
I always find that it gives you a sense of confidence too. If you, if you somebody says something and you write it down, so you have sort of like a record of it. You can look at it later and maybe even add more things if you feel that's necessary. But it's good to have things kind of, jotted down in some way.
Initially, yes.
Another benefit, I think there's a social benefit to keeping good notes. Because then, my classmates,
can share them.
afterwards, They would ask me for my notes, and
Yeah, absolutely.
it helps forge friendships.
Absolutely.
Sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, if they're okay.
All right. Okay. All right. So where does it start? It starts by eliminating any sort of distractions that you have around. Find yourself a comfortable place. Of course, you're in your classroom. So what you want to do is you want to sit in class where you can see and you can hear, and there's nothing around you that's going to distract you. Keep your cell phone and other things off the desk and focus on exactly what's happening in class. All right. Anything else, unless you need a textbook, you just want to give yourself enough room to take the notes. You want to look at what are the main themes being discussed during the course of the class. Your professor is probably going to tell you in the beginning about what's going to be occurring in the course of the class. And if that's the case, then you have an idea of what the order will be. It is very important not to let your focus slip. All right. If somebody is asking a question, listen to the question. It's going to relate directly to whatever the lesson is. You may find the answer to a question that you were thinking of in the class and did not ask. So you want to keep focus on the class. Keep listening, keep watching, and keep taking your notes.
Just to add to that, I think, we all being human, our minds will, get distracted from time to time. You might start thinking what you're going to eat for lunch that day or things like this. But the issue here is not to beat yourself up when that happens, but just to say to yourself, I'm here now, I'm present in this moment, and bring your mind back. And, eventually you'll find that I won't say it will never happen, but you will get less distracted.
Absolutely.
You'll find that it's like a skill like other skills. You will get better at just staying focused and listening.
I also would want to emphasize, distraction, especially with technology. Phones are very distracting.
Absolutely. It's got to be off the desk.
Yeah, off the desk, away from your side.
Right.
Because sometimes you would say, no, it's just there on my desk.
No.
But the moment you
That's
get a
right.
message and it will light up or
Yeah.
vibrate a little bit,
Yeah,
even if it's on
yeah.
silent, you're distracted.
And the focus
Yeah.
is broken.
Yeah.
And you're left really to try and bring yourself back. But
Yeah.
whatever happens, always make sure that you do indeed bring yourself back. All right.
That's it.
And whenever you're in class or whenever there's a presentation or if you're at any sort of conference, listen to the message because you're really interested in what the speaker has to say. Be less distracted, if you will, by the presenter themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Although that's how you react sometimes how you react to the message does coincide with how you react to the messenger. But you want to make sure that you take a step back and remember what you're there for
Yeah.
and the kind of information that you're there to gather together. Okay. So, what are the note-taking systems? There are three that we're going to discuss. Some of them, the first two, I think you probably know pretty well. Verbatim means taking notes word for word. This is a very difficult task to do. There is no way you're going to be able in a 1-hour class, in a 15-minute session, that you're going to be able to get a word for word
Yeah.
dictation basically down, a notation down, of what the speaker has said. It's almost an impossibility. In your effort to make sure you're getting every word, you're going to miss the back end of the message. So try and think about it. Although it's one way to do it, it may not be the most efficient way to do it, but it is one way.
But there are technologies, if it's really necessary, that you have to get verbatim notes for any reason, technology can work with it. So the cell phone that was a distraction earlier can actually serve a very good purpose for this particular item in our workshop. So you can use your phone to record.
Right.
Now, you have to keep in mind when you record, someone asks for permission first.
No question about
Yeah.
that. The other way to do it is creating your own informal outline notes. Decide how you're going to take the notes. If you are using a textbook and you intend to sell the textbook, then you cannot write in it. So make sure that you are an active participant in class by having a notebook and a pen at your disposal. You can use your own code. You can use, a dictation system, if anybody remembers the old shorthand system, all right, or an abbreviation system, and some of us are very good at that because of, the way we have to write on Instagram, for
Yeah.
example. Our instant messages have to be very short. So use the abbreviation system, use your own code system. The key here is use what is most convenient for you. What you will understand. You can write in the margins if you're going to keep the book. You can write in an outline system with the, at the top, you have the topic and then maybe the subtopics and all of your notes underneath that. Leave space. Going to need some space if in case you miss something, or if you want to add something, or if you want to clarify something when you review your notes later. You should always review the notes a little later. The Cornell system is it's a note-taking system within a notebook that is a suggested abbreviation type of system. You're going to divide one page into several different sections. Right? You're going to take notes within those sections. Then they are very specific. You're going to reinforce those notes after you reread what you have written to make sure that you add anything, or if you have to ask a question, that you fill it in at some point. You're going to take a look at the information, reflect on it, and think about what you're going to need and how you're going to use the information that you've gathered. Are you going to need for some sort of quotation or insert into a paper, or are you going to need to be able to give it back in some sort of exam or test? And then finally, just review the notes in general, especially before you go to the next class, because these notes should lead from one class to another to another. Actually, all your notes should lead from one class to another to another. And this is what the page looks like. You can see in the top column, the top of half of the page, it's actually a quarter of a page. All right, it's divided into two sections. But I want you to know one of the most important things in the right-hand corner. It's the name of the class and the date in which the class occurred. All right, you don't have to have the time frame because your class is probably going to occur basically at the same time, each session. But you want the date, and very important, and the name of the class, especially if you have a notebook that is like a 5-section notebook where you have different classes, notes in there. List in the Q column all the keywords, any word that is said over and over and over again, any trade word or buzzword or a word that's intrinsic to whatever the lesson is. You want to put that up there. Any questions that either have been asked by the teacher or answered by the teacher. You want to put those in there.
I'd like to
Yes.
Share my insights on that
Yes.
one. Again, this is based on experience from when I was a student and from when I am teaching. Very often, questions that professors would ask in the class would find their way into an exam.
Most
Very
definitely.
often. So
Most
pay close
definitely.
attention when your professor is asking a question. In one form or another, they're basically saying, this is important. So it's very good to include that in your quiz.
Absolutely. There are times when your professor will say, this is important, make sure that you write this down. Make sure that you write it down at that point. all right?
If you're in doubt, because, again, looking at the real world, teachers do sometimes go off topic, they sometimes ramble, and sometimes it's hard to follow, exactly whether that information is, is going to be on the test or not. So you should always, if you're in doubt, you should ask, is this going to be on the test?
Yeah.
And, I guess after you've been in a class for a little while, you get a sense of that teacher,
Right.
what their method of teaching, whether they kind of do go off topic more or less. And, all this becomes somewhat, I suppose, intuitive, but, when in doubt, when you're not sure, you should always just say, is this something that we need to know for our test? And most teachers will not take, umbrage at that,
Absolutely.
So we'll tell you.
And you will notice that in the note-taking column, you're going to put any key ideas. if there's any dates or times or places or people that were intrinsic to the lesson, you're going to write them down. If your professor has given you a diagram, and maybe you can't draw the diagram with a picture, but it is someplace within your text.
Yeah.
Make a note of where it is so that you can look at it again. Same thing would be true of formulas. Although with formulas, sometimes you may have to write them down, and as the professor is writing them, if they start to erase them from the board, saying, I haven't quite finished yet.
Yeah.
You know, and they will be in there for you. There's no question. All right. Any information that is repeated more than once
Yeah.
is important information, and you should mark it down. The bottom half of in the Cornell notes is a summary of the notes of the lesson, of the session in your own words. What was discussed during the current class? What was the topic? What were the different subpoints? Was there anything in particular that was stressed? You want to put all of that down, and you want to do this. You probably can't do the summary while you're in class, but you want to write the summary as close to the end of class as possible. All right. So once you've left the class, give yourself a few minutes if you have it, or the next available opportunity to make sure that you write the information down.
One more tip I have for this one, another context clue I get from my teachers. When they say something like, there are 5 ways, or there are 3 things, when they start enumerating something, I make sure I get all of those items.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if they took the effort to remember those things, it means those things are important. So that's a big context clue for me. When they say there are 2 ways, there are 5 types, there are 6 methods, I make sure I get all of those.
Absolutely. Make sure you can account for
Yeah.
everyone that they've mentioned. Okay. So strategies before, during, and after class. And there is a strategy for each one of them. And each one of them presents opportunities for you to make sure that you have the information that you need for the test or the essay that you're going to be involved in. For class, if you have an assignment to read, please read it before you get to class. Whether it's an assigned chapter or a short story, or even just to go over your previous session's notes. Know where you are going into that class. Most students at our university have at least 5 classes. So that's a lot to keep track of. So there's no reason to have to try and keep track of it in your head. Write everything down so that you can look at it. Again, sit where you can see and you can hear. Don't always gravitate to the back of the class. All right. Turn your cell phone, if not off, turn it on mute and put it away. There's no substitute for that. You will have an opportunity if you are going to be online for some reason, if there's something that your professor wants you to look at, even to look up a definition. They'll say, okay, take your cell phones out and find it. At that point, you can use the cell phone. Have all the materials that you need when you sit down. A piece of paper, a pen, the textbook, whatever it is that you're working on, if it's a handout or if it's a digital copy of a short story, make sure that you have access to it because you're going to need it during the course of the class, all right? And then you're going to pick whatever note-taking system is the most amenable to you. Whatever it is that makes you the most comfortable, whatever it is, it's going to make it easier for you to understand. It's your system. Nobody else has to understand it. If you want to use Greek letters and it works for you, then that's the system to use. During class, they number the page, each page of your notes. All right. So if it's today's date, which is the 20th of October, 10, 20, 21, and the name of the class at the top, and then this way, and it will go on for several pages. When you change classes or when you change the day, then just redate it again. So anyone from point A to point B, from 10/20 to 21 to 10/21/21, you know that that's one class session. Okay. Listen actively. Be an active participant in class. We've already talked about not letting, our minds will always wander. We have a lot of things on our mind, and we're always thinking about what's coming next and what we have to do. It takes focus. You need to be able to clear your mind of everything else and focus on what you're doing at the time. Or the note-taking will be shoddy, slipshod, or empty in some spots, okay?
One key component of listening actively is responding asking questions.
Absolutely.
So if there's anything unclear, your professor appreciate kindly question, an honest question.
And don't hesitate to ask. If you need if there's an assignment and you're not sure what the directions are, don't do an incomplete task or do the task wrong. If you're unsure about anything, ask your professor. They will answer your questions. All right. Leave spaces between the main idea in case you want to add something. If you think that there's something that you missed for some reason in class, leave a space so that you can ask somebody else. Whenever a professor says more than once, that they repeat a theory or they make a statement, that's the kind of thing you want to make sure that you write down. And particularly if your professor says, "I want you to remember this." It doesn't have to be somebody standing on the top of the desk saying, "I want you to remember this." It could be somebody just saying, "You need to remember this. Make sure you understand this. Make sure you remember, this theory." That's something that you've already been told is going to be. After class, if you have the opportunity, and it doesn't have to be immediately after class, because some of you have got to go to another class, that's for sure. All right. Compare your notes with a classmate. Work in study groups. Study groups are wonderful things. All right. So, and you can check to see if your notes are accurate, and then see what everybody else has come up with from that class. They may have come up with something that you missed, or you may have something that they have missed. So it's a nice cooperative. Always review your own notes, making sure that sometimes we're writing very fast. So you want to make sure that if you need to rewrite it in some way to make sure that it's clear that you do that. There's nothing worse than sitting down to study and looking at notes and saying, "Now what does that say?" What is that word? So you want to try and avoid to do that. You can summarize your notes in the margin of your books. You can summarize your notes, even add extra notes in the margin of your notebook. Right? Anything that makes it clear, anything that you need to remember. Check your notes against your checkbook, your textbook, if you have a textbook, or against any notes that you've gotten in class, or any PowerPoints that have been in class, to make sure that you've gotten everything down correctly.
One thing, Bobby, that was mentioned in one of your bullets about identifying potential test questions. Sometimes, again, harking back from my time as a student, sometimes I make a game out of this, where I try to anticipate what questions would come out.
Absolutely.
And then if it does come out, I give myself a little reward for, anticipating. And of course, if you try to anticipate the questions, anticipate the answers.
Absolutely.
Make it a review guide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Use note cards. A lot of people use note cards. They find them very effective. Doesn't have to be a notebook, but just make sure that they're dated and the class is at the top of it, or they're bound together in some way. All right. Try and review your notes definitely before the next class, but within a certain time period, so you don't let the time be too far between when you take the notes and when you actually go to review. All right. You can write summaries. Summary writing is a skill, but if you can write a summary of every class, if you can write down in words what went on in class, and somebody can read it as if you're giving the notes to somebody else, then you know what went on in that class. If you can write it out from your memory, then you know what's going on in that class. All right. Always keep your notes in the same place, or in a place where you can find them. There's nothing worse, none worse feeling than be right before the test and you're thinking, where did I put those notes? Where are my notes? Make sure that they're in the same spot all the time, so you know what they are.
That's a great insight. I didn't even think about that. But you're right. It's like losing anything else that's important,
Yes.
and you're looking for it. And
There's no question. And you're relying on it. Oh, I know, and I have those notes, but if you don't know where the notes are, that's not going to help too.
so it's for
sure.
keep things in the same place, that's really true.
Okay, we have a little video now that we're going to show you. What I would like you to do as you're watching this video is to take notes and divide the video into, it's a short video. Take part of the notes verbatim. See how well you do taking notes word for word. All right. At some point, don't spend a lot of time, a few minutes. Try to take them in your own note-taking fashion. The third section, I want you to try and use the Cornell method. Separate the page, use the columns, the cue words, use the, the keywords and phrases, and then the summary at the bottom, right? So try that as you watch this. Okay? Yes. All right. After the video, I want you to think about the 3 different styles and try and reflect on which you think is the most amenable for you. All right. Maybe you do really well with your abbreviated system, with your note-taking system, and verbatim works for you. That's fine. That's your system. The informal note-taking system, again, using your own system, maybe that works for you. If you find that breaking down a page in a notebook helps you because it places everything in a certain spot, then maybe the Cornell system is for you. So after you do that, you want to after you try it, think about, reflect on the benefits and the challenges of each method.
We will add a link to the video in the description of this video.
So after you do all that, if you want to talk to someone in the CAE about the results of the activity we've done here, please do not hesitate to make an appointment with one of the writing tutors here in the CAE to go over your note-taking activities and if you still have any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.